Hello and welcome to StateScoop TV. I'm Jake Williams. We're here for our series on the journey to the cloud. Our guest today is Stuart McKee. He's the CTO at Microsoft. Stuart, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So Stuart, how is the cloud helping state and local agencies succeed in achieving their agency mission?
Well, you know what? Having been a former CIO and here at NASCIO, seen a lot of people that I've known for a long time, and having personally been in technology for 30 years and 20 years in public sector, I really struggle with the word cloud because it's kind of a marketing term. So you end up with this kind of idea of, it's kind of like barbecue, trying to figure out what does it mean. It's a big word.
Yeah.
But I think a better word, at least from Microsoft's perspective, is the idea of networked enabled computing and the word hyperscale, right? So not all clouds are created equal. And so if we parse that back, what I can tell you is that technology continues to be a dramatic impact in the public sector in a bunch of ways. A lot of people look at it as maybe just saving money. How can I do things a little better, faster, and quicker? But what we're seeing is really innovative solutions that are taking advantage of networked enabled computing and hyperscale capabilities to solve really tough public sector issues. We've had some really unfortunate news over the last couple days related to public safety, for example. And we have a number of customers like City of New York, for example, that has taken advantage of artificial intelligence capabilities, for lack of better words, and big data, which are other big buzzwords, but to create capabilities that make a safer city and a safer area. So it's things like that we get really excited about. And frankly, at Microsoft, one of the things that we're doing is spending a lot of time taking the unique requirements of government and driving it back into our capabilities and into our engineering environment.
That's great. And so as CTO, you definitely have a good view over the landscape, and you just mentioned a couple great examples of some projects underway in state and local government. Tell me about some of the most interesting cloud projects that you're seeing across state and local government right now or in the near future, and really what are the technologies that are making them possible?
Well, I spend a lot of time trying to simplify because I'm kind of a geek and we can really get into a deep conversation about a bunch of stuff, but I find myself in a lot of interesting conversations, whether it's with a governor, a legislator, a mayor, an IT, a network administrator, and if I have to pick one thing I'm going to talk about, I want to talk about cyber. But I don't want to talk about it in the traditional sense. I think a lot of people talk about cybersecurity and, oh my gosh, and I can give you a long list. Office of Personnel Management, 22 million records. IRS, millions of records. The Equifax, which was in the news. Yeah. And the reality is we're just seeing every day new news. Any one of those stories would have been huge news, but it gets washed away by the next story. But what I'm trying to do is help people understand that if I was going to, really focus on one thing, it's the idea that this connected world, this cloud-enabled environment that we have, regardless of the solution you're putting in place, whether you're a city trying to deploy smart garbage cans, or you're a police department trying to put smart policing in place, or a water district trying to put automated toll systems in place, or a roads department trying to fix roads, that this connected world, as great as it is, it's actually creating some new vectors. So what can you do about it? And it turns out the cloud itself, at least in Microsoft's perspective, this hyperscale capability is giving advanced capabilities to actually address with cybersecurity. So whether or not you're moving into the cloud or not in the cloud, we believe not everything goes into the cloud. There's going to still be on-premise infrastructure. There's going to be infrastructure in your pocket. There's going to be infrastructure in cars, and there's going to be infrastructure under the desk and in data centers and our data center. But what we've done is really a couple things related to cyber I would encourage everybody to consider. Identity is the new firewall, and devices are the new perimeter. So there's three things. All of the major breaches that have happened recently could have either been mitigated or completely eliminated with three simple things. One, organizational responsibility. It's not a technology issue. Most organizations don't have the organizational responsibility built into who's responsible if something happens, who's supposed to be checking the environment. That's a big one. The last one, and then I'll finish with a middle one, but the last one is around cyber hygiene. You got to do the basics. You got to patch your systems. You got to train, right? And you got to make sure people are trained and your systems are patched and backed up, right? So ransomware, ransomware shouldn't be an issue, right? If your system's backed up, you shouldn't pay the bad guys. But the third thing, and the really, really big one, to get to your question of what are the innovative things that are happening in the cloud, is around identity. And that's the idea, the ability to implement advanced authentication capabilities without racking massive amounts of servers, without having to plan years in advance. You can deploy those kind of capabilities in the cloud and turn them on. So username and password is great, and you can have a password policy, but you better very quickly be getting to ideas of multi-factor authentication. And it turns out with our hyperscale environment, you can take advantage of the massive compute power that we've built, the massive amount of CPUs, the massive amount of servers and spindles to manage identity in a way that allows customers to just turn it on. And what that means is, overnight, you can enable multi-factor authentication. And what that does is gives you a whole new set of capabilities that harden an environment and make it harder for the bad guys to get in. Then you can go the next step and implement capabilities like advanced threat protection, which gives you a whole set of behavior analytics on an environment that you could have never done before. So we could talk about creative solutions and how we're solving and creating new services for citizens, but the thing I like to talk about is the creative services we're actually enabling to help governments protect all their environments, regardless of on-premise or what agency it's running in.
That's awesome. And you know, how is cloud, we talked about some of the cybersecurity benefits of cloud, we've talked to some other folks about modernization and cost savings and compliance. How is the cloud saving agencies money from your perspective? And really, can you provide some examples of some use cases you've seen?
Great question. So as a former CIO and somebody who's been involved in the public sector for a long time, I mean, let's be clear and get it out on the table. Government doesn't save money the way the private sector does.
Sure.
And it's not a good or a bad thing, but it's just related to the color of money. Government budgets and money flows in government are different. So a lot of times we try and compare this idea of saving money like we would in the private sector. Right? Are we hitting the bottom line? Bottom lines in government are a little bit different. It's not good or bad, it's just different. It's color of money. And the fact of the matter is government has massive investments in physical infrastructure and data centers. It's not a bad thing. It just happens that's the best decisions we can make over time.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we have a number of examples across the country where there's this massive infrastructure investment at probably one of the worst times possible.
Sure.
You know, Moore's Law, Metcalfe's Law, Gilder's Law have been happening, and so we've been able to compress more and more and more in smaller spaces. So a lot of these places actually have excess data center capacity, and they've built physical infrastructure. The big wins, in my opinion, are when leaders, and it's hard for leadership because you have to pick and you have to make decisions. But the big wins are when government can see we have scarce resources, and these massive data center investments, in spite of as pretty as the buildings are and as cool as they are, that those dollars would be far better spent on other capabilities. That's where we're seeing the really big returns. And you know, we can talk about storage and some of the commodity related things. Police body cam video is a great example. There's a whole generation of capabilities that are now available and financially possible because of the hyperscale investments Microsoft has made, has driven underlying infrastructure costs down so low that you can now deal with the idea that an officer might generate, you know, a gigabyte or more of data a day, right? So if you think of a body camera and 1,000 officers each generating a gigabyte a day, we got to store it. Okay, well, just storage is fine, but then what are you going to do with it? You need to process it, you need to be able to index it, you need to be archive it, you need to be able to redact it, you need to be able to share it, right? And all of those things, and that's what the cloud is really doing.
So last question, you know, we've now talked about how state governments are paying for cloud and thinking about the cost savings associated with cloud. Where is this going? Where do you see the way that agencies fund clouds changing, and in what ways do you anticipate those cost savings to improve in the years ahead?
So, you know, cost savings is just one part of it. I think government really needs to look at outcomes and outcome-based kind of decision making. Not did I just save money? I mean, saving money is great, but if you're not providing service to citizens or meeting the policy objectives of leadership, then you know. So I think you're going to find whether it's cloud or whatever technologies are coming to market, you're going to be able to, I'm a technologist, so I believe technology is a powerful tool. You're going to continue to find ways for these capabilities to provide new services and enhance previous services. But if I could tell a quick story, I think for leadership, I love the analogy of the Industrial Revolution. Early in this century in the United States, our industrial might was driven by water wheels. And the idea that you located a factory and you had to be near a river and you drove a water wheel and the water wheel drove a shaft that went through gears and drove a pipe in the middle of a post in the middle of a vertical factory, and that spinning pillar drove pulleys and gears, and that drove the machines in the factory, right? And that's how things got done. Well, the electric engine came, and oh my gosh, the world's changed. Isn't this wonderful? It's new technology, right? And factory owners ripped out their water wheels and they put in their electric engines. And what happened? It was a disaster, right? Productivity didn't go up. All the dreams and visions of, oh, this is wonderful, didn't happen because it turns out the electric engines were expensive, right? You had to be located, instead of next to a river, you had to be located near power generation, right? And you had to hire special people. You probably had to have a chief electrical officer, right, to maintain these engines, right? So people said things like, this technology isn't going to really do anything for us. This isn't really worthwhile. We got tricked again. Let's go back to the old way. But what happened over the next 50 years is people figured out, rather than this large vertical structure with one source of energy driving all my belts and pulleys, I could develop and build a vertical factory. And I could deploy special mission critical, but not the right word, mission specific electric engines to get work done in the factory. I could distribute that energy. I could distribute that workload, if that makes sense. And what happened is the assembly line was invented, right? Productivity went through the roof. Safety improved dramatically. The cost of producing products dropped. And what happened was the Industrial Revolution, basically. So the moral of the story is you can't insert a new technology into an old architecture and expect results. Cloud computing is a marketing term. Cloud is marketing, and not all clouds are created equal. From our perspective, from Microsoft's perspective, hyperscale computing, data complexes. Our data centers are the equivalent of multiple data centers. A traditional data center, a big one, 10,000 square feet, we have facilities that are 900 acres in size. And we have multiples of them in the United States. The fact of the matter is those capabilities are so powerful that we really are engaged with leaders and others to try and think about ways, how can you take advantage of the scale that we've built with the investments you currently have to create the equivalent of distributed computing, and let's invent this generation's industrial revolution for government.
Well, Stuart, that's a really great point to end on, and I'm super excited to see where Microsoft's going to take the cloud next. Thanks for all you said today.
Great, thanks for having me.
For more about what Microsoft and Stuart McKee are working on, check out statescoop.com. I'm Jake Williams, Statescoop's Associate Publisher and Director of Strategic Initiatives, here with Stuart McKee, the Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft. Thanks for watching.